Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for attending. I'm very honored to have Julie Foreman and Denise Cordero coming on to talk about their practice, Intrinsic Wholeness. So it's great. We've had a number of our providers reach out and say, can we jump into this series where I really enjoy this because we've got real practitioners talking about how they've integrated the testing into their practices, and more importantly, sharing with their colleagues, how they've built their practices, how they've grown them, the types of things that they use in the practice day to day. Because I know you're all incredibly busy, so sometimes that's quite difficult to do. Or you'll be staring up at screen and you'll be seeing some guy, oh my gosh, he's constantly on the circuit and doesn't really get an opportunity to practice. So this is why I think this is so powerful, because you're hearing from your colleagues on how to practice, not only with the fit test, which obviously I'm keen for everyone to talk about, but more importantly, some of the supplementation and generally some of the kind of protocols and ideas that patients have had. So without further ado, let me hand over to Julie Freeman and Denise Cordero, and we'll take it from there. And I'll be in the chat answering any questions, and we'll have a Q&A at the end as well.
Great. Thank you so much, James. And thank you so much for having us here today. It is an absolute pleasure. And, I remember when you and I first started chatting back in the day, people could go to the lab and get the VD puncture done. And then we went on to develop the finger prick test. And then during COVID, I know you and I had discussions around, like, how are we going to be able to get a CBC, a CMP, and all these other things happening? And now you've got the gut barrier panel and now the CIT. And it's just absolutely amazing that we can bypass the laboratory. So thank you in that respect. So I always like to start off, I started out as a registered dietitian, graduated in 1979, and knew that that was not the be-all and end-all. And so took a convoluted path of study, actually went to chiropractic school for 6 months and said, well, this is interesting, but not exactly what I want to do. And then went on to do my graduate work in mental health and counseling, which I use every day of my life. But then went on to do my mind-body medicine work with Herb Benson, functional medicine certification with Ron Grisanti, genomics, yoga, Reiki. And I oftentimes joke and say, I'm like the kid in the candy store minus the candy. But I am so grateful for my undergrad in nutrition, because my nutrition program was part of the home economics division, and we had a cook from day one. And one of the areas that I will tie together here today is that testing is wonderful. Testing gives us data, but then you need to take that testing and bring it into the real world. And so many people are ill-equipped with, how do I put meals together? How do I go grocery shopping? What do I look for on a label? And so I absolutely love the advent of this test and how we can actually kind of bring that together. And then before I hand it over to Denise for her to introduce herself, we worked together. We've kind of intertwined over the years. I was working at an integrative clinic on the North Shore in Massachusetts, where Denise was the practice manager and actually had started this particular practice up, an integrative medicine practice. But one of the things that we shared was this common vision of wanting to bring together the energetics, the science, the sacred, and all of that into mind, body, spirit medicine. And now, we know that people are screaming for that approach, that we know that just looking at the biology and the physiology alone will not heal us the way that we want to be properly healed. So without further ado on that, I'm going to hand it over to Denise for a moment to introduce herself.
Thank you, Julie, for that. So my career in healthcare practice management spanned over 25 years. I like to say that I'm still kind of in that space as I'm wearing different hats with Intrinsic Wholeness. But really, opportunity met my curiosity to really dive into all areas of the medical practice, from the front desk to medical assisting, health information technology. And then eventually I got into operations and then private consulting for physicians that were starting up their own solo practices. So some 13 odd years ago, my life began to pivot in a new direction. And I began to ask myself what my purpose is, not just my vocation, my job, the different roles that I had. And this led me to my training in energy medicine and coaching. Today, I find so much meaning and purpose in helping others ask this very question that really helped to awaken me. And we provide our clients with that healing space that allows them to reclaim their wholeness that perhaps they had long forgotten, and really to empower them to become the creative beings that we all are. And that's understanding that consciousness has the ability to change chemistry, and therefore our biology and our reality. Essentially, our thoughts can change our gene expression and the experience of life itself.
Yes. Thank you, Denise. That's a wonderful thing to bring up, because in our practice we actually use looking at the mind, the body, and the spirit. And from the body perspective, yes, I am looking at the biochemistry. I'm looking at labs. We look at the last 1 to 2 years of labs, tests, office visits. We do a very extensive, comprehensive assessment from pre-birth up until now. What was your in utero experience? What were your early childhood events that might have been adverse? And so the ACEs we take a look at. We look at environmental exposures and all of that. And we also use an epigenetics program to really look at the individual unique variations that might have caused some challenges for individuals. So we're looking at epigenetics not only from the spirit and the mind perspective, but we're also looking at the the epigenetics from the body perspective as well. And so I'm looking at a lot of the biochemistry aspects of things, love using the FIT test in that respect as well, and also the protocols that go along with that. And then Denise is also doing a deeper dive into that, again, the big why. I love Simon Sinek. What is your why? And so that is something that we bring into our practice every day. So Denise, talk a little bit more about your elements in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. So I often refer back to a newsletter that I read from Dr. James Greenblatt, who's a prominent functional psychiatrist. And he said, whole person care goes hand in hand with spirituality. So while mindset plays a huge role in creating change, spirituality is the way that individuals seek ultimate meaning and purpose and connection, value, even transcendence. So let's face it, change is very hard. It's very difficult. And we all want to be healthy. We all want to be happy. But even with the information at our hands and the tools at our fingertips, we don't always make the best decisions for ourselves. And this could be because we have deeply ingrained, just bad habits that are not conducive to our health, or we have installed limited beliefs that really hold us back from reaching our goals. So I find that spirituality is the meaning and the purpose that becomes the anchor. And I like to engage our clients with questions that evoke insights, because when they get that insight, their perception begins to shift. And so when the perception shifts, the mindset begins to shift. And that's where we create a new set point.
Yes.
So I'd like to continue with the questions that we ask.
Yep. Why KBMO?
Yes. So speaking of going into the deeper questions, asking the questions, part of the journey that we co-create with our clients is getting to their personal why. Why take care of your health? Why unblock energy flow and create a life of passion and vitality? And of course, Julie will expand on why KBMO.
Yeah. So I've been around the block a number of times. I've been doing this work for about 35 years. I remember when Genova Diagnostics was Great Smokies, as many of you may still remember. and have been using food sensitivity in my practice for a great number of years. I'm originally from Boston, and I was lucky enough to be able to actually start some of the original food sensitivity protocols and work with the labs in a few of the Boston hospitals to create access for clients to be able to go and get their blood drawn. And back in those days, it was even covered by insurance. So that tells you how long ago I've actually been using this kind of testing. There was some utility to the original IgG testing, but what we also saw were a lot of false positives. You know, if you ate those almonds every single day, then they certainly were going to show high. So there were definitely some flaws in the area. I did find that for my Candida patients or my SIBO patients, which we still see a lot on, that there seemed to be some really good, accurate information that we could get. But as I've gone along and expanded, I love what KBMO has done in terms of looking at not only the IgG, but looking at these immune complexes to really look at the inflammatory response that is taking place from these delayed reactions. I also love the fact that they have now added the gut barrier panel with this rich information to be able to look at the gut integrity. You know, where is it? Is it the chicken or the egg? Do these people really have a sensitivity to this food? Or is it really that they've got a broken down gut barrier panel, gut barrier sensitivity? And where do we need to intervene? How do we intervene? How do we create the most personalized approach for their healthcare? So this is definitely, you know, one of the areas that I really love and have found KBMO to be the most useful test out there in the market, at least in my experience. So how do I use the Fit 176? And I would say, you know, I've listened to and really would encourage people to watch some of Christy Hughes' podcasts and webinars that are on KBMO as well, because she does a great job of really explaining the utility, the usefulness, and some of the great rich information. So that's on the KBMO website. And many of us use this panel in a very similar way. So I only use the 176 panel. And the reason is because I want to get the largest group of foods available in order to be able to create meaningful meal plans for people. So if you remember in the beginning, I said, you know, it's great to have the data and the lab information, but then how do we put that into practical application for individuals so that they have a varied and a broad diet? Because if people are eating things ad nauseum, the same food over and over and over again, eventually they may show up with a sensitivity to it and they have to take it out. So I will only offer the 176. I recommend that clients use only the dark green foods and that they omit the red, yellow, and orange, and even the mint green foods as well, ideally for 3 months. So I kind of throw that 3 months out there in terms of really helping to reset and reduce inflammation. But then I bring up my sales pitch and say, hey, if you can hang in there for a month, let's see how things are going. And then we'll take month 2 and month 3. Because as much as patients love to get this data, they're like itching to do the test and get it done. When they get the results back, it's like, oh my God, what am I going to eat? And so the stopgap is there. And so this is where actually Denise comes in terms of helping to coach and help to really change the mindset from one of deprivation into one of like, oh my God, I have information. I can actually do something with this. And then I help to co-create the meal plan and balance all of that, which we'll talk a little bit about. So Denise, tell me a little bit about some of our experience with coaching clients once they get the, oh my God, I have nothing to eat.
Yes. So of course, when first looking at the FIT report, not shocking, many clients will just go to that place of deprivation and they get discouraged. And of course, they get overwhelmed and feel that they'll be limited. So this is the part where we really support our clients in understanding that the changes are not permanent and really breaking it down into these small digestible units where they feel like they have more control in being able to manage the elimination phase of the healing process. After all, one of the things, many times our clients to us, they're already greatly limited by the allergies and sensitivities that they have. And so they don't want to experience, any uncomfortable symptoms that have really impacted their quality of life. So what I love about this graph and doing the 6 panel, the expanded panel, as Julie was talking about, is that it can actually highlight opportunities for them to try foods perhaps that they haven't tried before. So we can balance that, oh my God, I'm going to have to give up these foods, and say, aha, but look at the opportunities here where I can try some certain foods that I never had before. And Julie is extremely creative when it comes to creating these custom meal plans for our clients.
Thank you, Denise. Yes. So the other thing that I try to do with the graph, and it's actually set up in a nice way, is to identify what are your main protein sources, what are going to be your starchy carbohydrate sources, your vegetables, your fruits, your fats and oils and things like that, because many people are very clueless around what actually a protein, a fat, and a carb are. And it's important to make sure that as I'm putting the meal plans together, that we are balancing these foods. You never want to eat a carb without a protein, so that you're not going to get the spike and then the crash. We also use continuous glucose monitoring with some of our clients, and finding that that's a great way, in addition to some of this testing, to really look at overall inflammation and how we can reduce that inflammation. But, there's so much rich information, and then you need to take that and then create, again, information that clients are going to be able to take and put foods together, meal plans together. I just was on with another client today that we've done the test with, and she said, well, how do I cook that? So I said, okay, I'm going to send you over a sheet, and then I will personalize that information in terms of, well, what can I do with a vegetable in order to make it taste good? You don't have to boil it. You can oven roast it. You can do so many different things to actually make it more flavorful and more palatable. Creating ambiance, deliciousness, taste, visual variety in there, so that it looks pretty on the plate. I oftentimes tell people, we eat with our eyes as well. And so be able to look at that food on your plate and go, that's beautiful, what I just created for myself. And I deserve, that's part of the why, I deserve to be nourished. And so we nourish ourselves visually, as well as olfactory, and as well as with our taste buds as well. So that's one thing right there. I love the gut barrier panel. As I mentioned, I've been into Candida for many years. I happen to be one of those people. I call myself the perfect poster child for functional medicine, because I've had many immune challenges, a rare leukemia, staph infections, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I oftentimes go back and use myself as the guinea pig for many of these things. But longstanding Candida, that is a challenge. But with the advent of including the zonulin, the occludin, the LPS, we can really further tightly put together a meal plan and a supplement plan for clients that will really help them to hone in on whether this or not this is the chicken or the egg. How are we going to treat it? And I also love the fact that we can also create these protocols with clients in terms of how to treat it. And so what's really nice is that KBMO and FullScript have gathered together to create a protocol, which is really simple. And I oftentimes will revert to that in some of my clients. I also am oftentimes working with people that are coming in with IgE allergies, and then have also done patch testing with a very well-known clinic in Boston. And so they're looking at chemical sensitivities and things of that nature. So I may either expand upon this protocol, or I may be starting with something like an elemental diet, and I might be looking at using IgG like as an SBI Protect, and some of these other things, buffered C in order to bind onto nickel. And so there may be other things that would be expanding this protocol. But for those of us that are clinicians, it is so helpful to have this information available at our fingertips in terms of what KBMO has done with FullScript. So I really appreciate having those supplements available for us and for our clients. The other thing that I find about with protocols is that depending on the client that you're working with, it might stop at, oh my God, I can't take all those supplements, or, I'm not going to do the plan. And so again, I bring Denise into the coaching in terms of why the protocol is important, how this can get you from point A to point B potentially more quickly. And we also work with another company that does some compounding of supplements so that sometimes we can put all of that into a powder or into a capsule form, and we don't have to take 5 or 6 different pills or different companies at the same time. So there's a wide variety of ways that we try to support clients to utilize the supplements. And then we also try to also work with them in terms of their fears, their inability to follow through. And again, this is where Denise kind of comes in with that coaching. So Denise, talk a little bit about how we have the protocol in our health portal, and then how you also help clients with that.
Yes, thank you, Julie. So again, because we are a virtual practice, we don't want to lose the human connection, and being high touch is super, super important. So being able to almost virtually handhold our clients through their process, understanding what their fears, what their challenges are, and making it as easy and as efficient as possible from going to their protocol in the practice management system, Practice Better, and being able to place their order is super important. Really helping them, whether it's a technical thing or whether it's a fear-based thing, but really being there with them and seeing what they need and supporting them, especially getting them to purchase their supplements and start taking them right away, because we know that symptom management is a critical piece in helping our clients staying engaging in their healing and feeling increased satisfaction. If they don't feel well soon, they are just going to drop off. They're going to lose interest. They're going to be frustrated. And that's, we want to help with that. We want to be able to counteract that and right away be able to look at what are the challenges, what are the barriers, so that they can get to their protocol, take their supplements, and start feeling better as soon as possible.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's a really important one right there for sure. And again, as practices have evolved, we were just online chatting a little bit about this prior to the webinar, that, we went almost overnight from being able to see people in person, which has a huge element of energetic connection and understanding, and being able to walk up to the front of the desk and say, this is what my doctor or my provider told me to get. Would you just pull those off the shelf? We've lost that to some degree, or we've entered an age where now you go into the portal, and Denise and I are constantly talking about how can we simplify this for people who are not so tech savvy. And I happen to be one of those people, I'll admit it. But I'm a great example of people who might go, oh my God, I don't know how I can do that, or will I do it, because I don't know how to take care of the portal. So Denise is always there to answer some of those questions, which is really, really, really helpful. So back to the fit graph. So now we've had our 1 month to 3 months, hopefully 3 months, of people being able to get into that more parasympathetic mode, that place where their body is now restored and feeling rested and ready to re-engage. We oftentimes are adding back one new food every 3 days. And so I have people kind of put together, what are the top foods that you would like to add back in there? If I do have someone who is coming in from that chemical sensitivity world, again, we work with a group at the Brigham and Women's, oftentimes we're looking at a 5-day reintroduction. So it might be that they're trying something for 5 days rather than 3 days because they have more chemical exposure, more detox that's probably had to happen. And we can usually find that out through their epigenetic testing as well. But generally, we'll start with that 3-day reintroduction. So we have them eat a small amount of that food. If they don't react to that food, great, check it off the list. They can add it in, and then they go on to the next one. And I do recommend that people make their list of top foods that they are really itching to add back. And that they also go from different categories, like what's a new protein that you'd like to add back? What's a new carb? What's a new vegetable, fruit, etc. And then we start to kind of vary that reintroduction. If there is a reaction, some kind of, abnormal reaction, whether it's a skin reaction, gut, joint pain, whatever it might be, then we put that on hold until the end. And so that's the way that we generally try to get people in terms of starting them back on to the reintroduction phase. If someone has not really made significant progress, which is not generally the case, we usually see that within that 3-month period, people are making some really good progress. Some are even sooner. And sometimes that depends on compliance. Then I may extend that longer and say, listen, there's no harm in you staying on this plan for a longer time. There's not a problem with that at all. And then we'll begin the reintroduction. The other thing is, again, I stayed with the 176 foods, and then we re-add in, we start with the mint greens, and then we go to the yellows, and then finally the oranges, and then lastly would be the reds. We may retest, but I generally don't retest somebody's 176 in less than a year. Sometimes it might even be a year and a half, 2 years. I might retest the gut barrier panel if I feel like people aren't making enough progress. And then again, there are other labs that I may be working with their physicians on in terms of looking at what's going on. So for example, one thing that I oftentimes see is a correlation with low ferritin. And we see this especially in women, that their storage of iron is low. And so they may not be making the gains that they could be making on some of these reintroductions. And so there are other labs that I'm looking at oftentimes, like a full thyroid panel, a ferritin, other things like that in terms of lab testing that might also be clues as to why somebody's not making the progress that we would like them to make. So on to a couple of case studies here. So I pulled out 3 different people that 3 different ages as well, but they all kind of came in through the medical door, as many of our clients do. They're coming in from medical referrals. And they all had not only immune allergy kinds of issues, but they definitely had gastrointestinal issues. So this was a lovely fellow, 52-year-old male. He was referred by his sister, who I had worked with, for an integrative approach to severe GI issues. He actually had a sigmoid resection for diverticulitis. He was on that low fiber brat diet, which was, talk about white starch, and not the healthiest diet. But he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to add fiber. He didn't know how to add any things back into his diet. He also culturally loved lots of carbs. He liked lots of corn, and he also loved fried foods. So, we're talking about somebody who wasn't the healthiest eater. He also had obesity as an issue as well, but he did love to exercise. But what he found was that after he would run, he would have severe pain and severe attacks, and then he'd have to go back on clear liquids for 2 to 3 days before that resolved and then come back. So came in to see me. We started to kind of check off the list and whatnot. I said, I think you're a really good candidate for us to do the fit test. And so come to find out, yes. And in fact, his wheat products was one of them that went. So we looked at some gluten-free alternatives, and we have to be very careful about gluten-free alternatives because many of the commercial products out there are just not healthy, and they're loaded with chemicals. So part of this was around the education of what to look for. And then I have certain brand names that I like. I am always taste testing things. I am always looking at labels, etc., and working with clients on brand names, how to order stuff, because that's another issue right there. His GB showed positive zonulin and candida, and wasn't surprised because he had that those skin issues as well. So we started with his dark green list and looked at the food that he was willing to eat. I also suggested for him, because he had so many of these issues from the diverticulitis, that we start with cooked foods. And I oftentimes am educating people on cooked versus raw. But when you have somebody with pretty significant GI issues, cooked is always easier because you're softening the fibers. You're also killing some of those enzymes that might cause some oral allergy symptoms or other kinds of issues. And so, we were working with that. And then we were also working with making sure that he was separating his fluids out from his foods. And I think, that again is an area of education for most of us, because most of us, learned or grew up with drink that cup of milk with, or that glass of water with your meal. Try to limit to about a half a cup so that you're preserving your digestive enzymes, your hydrochloric acid, and the things that you need in order to digest that food. Drink more of your fluids in between your meals, and ideally more room temperature rather than super ice cold or super hot. The body likes things, or the body has to bring things to body temperature. So that's another thing. We talk a little bit about talk a little bit about temperature. Slowly increasing fiber. So while we needed to increase his fiber, we needed to do it slowly. And a lot of the products on the market, oh my God, they're so high in fiber. It's like 12 grams of fiber. And I'll just use All Bran as an example. And of course, that's a wheat containing food, but I think most people know All Bran has 12 to 13 grams of fiber. No gut can handle that. And you'd need probably 2 to 3 cups of water just to be able to process that fiber. Otherwise, that fiber is going to get stuck, hardened, and encrusted inside the colon, and then you're going to end up with more problems. So I slowly advance fibers. I try to get people to look for around that 3 grams of fiber, probably no more than 8 grams of fiber. And with him, we definitely started with 3 and then advanced up between 3 and 5. And that actually worked really well for him. So I had other things that I was working with him, like I said, in terms of his gut integrity. So I had some zinc carnosine in there to help to heal the gut lining. I used a little bit of L-glutamine, collagen, which I use very frequently with many of my clients. And then I also used some resistant starch fiber, which I like because the resistant starch helps to feed those colon cells so that they can actually make the good quality flora so that we can reduce dysbiosis, and that was better. I used deglycerinized licorice with him. If clients don't like the taste of licorice, then sometimes just chewing those wafers is not helpful, because they may not eat it because they don't like the taste of licorice. There is a chocolate version that's a German version. I happen to like the DGL mastic gum because you're getting better bang for your buck in terms of healing and also appending symptoms. And then I also used a little bit of curcumin and berberine. So it's interesting with curcumin is that, again, I will go back to the fit test and look at turmeric, because if somebody is sensitive to turmeric, I may not use curcumin right off the bat. I may use something different. Berberine is wonderful because it not only has the antibacterial, antiviral properties, anti-candida properties. It's great for lowering blood sugars, which this fellow actually had elevated blood sugars, and it can help with, again, gut dysbiosis. So 1 year later, he had introduced pretty much all of his foods except for gluten and almond. Those are the 2 things that he said, you know what, I can't reintroduce those. They cause me pain. He lost weight, and he had rare stomach attacks. He's taking a break from us right now because he's doing great. So that was definitely a wonderful case study and a delightful fellow to work with. The next one was a 19-year-old male. He was referred by his allergist for non-IgE mediated reactions. We have a wonderful allergist immunologist that we work with closely in Boston. A lot of my contacts are still back in Boston because I was there for just about 60 years of my life and had my practice there for about 35 years. She's very open to food sensitivities. And so this was a wonderful connection. She said, gee, Julie, I'm seeing so many more people that are walking through the door with gut issues, and they're not showing up with IgE-mediated reactions. Let's see what else is going on. So he did have some sensitivity to some chemicals, whatnot. Definitely had some autoimmune-like characteristics, and also a family history of oh my goodness, blanking on it. gluten intolerance, celiac disease, excuse me. Brain blip there for a moment. He did not test positive for celiac disease, but there was celiac in the family. He also had an elevated glucose and A1C. For a young guy, that's kind of concerning. So I was definitely thinking inflammation, but his diet was so limited, and he was eating a lot of refined gluten-free carbs, gluten-free bagels, gluten-free breads. And again, most of those products are just awful. I do have brand names if anyone's interested of products that I really like, and happy to share those with you. He also had a low B12, low cholesterol. And when I see low cholesterols, I'm also trying to raise that cholesterol. And again, I've been a colleague of Dr. Greenblatt, James Greenblatt, for many, many years, and he does a lot of discussion around low cholesterol, depression, suicidal ideation, etc. So he's had some wonderful webinars on that. So he showed positive for LPS and Candida. Again, not surprised. And again, this data and this information was so helpful for him because he was extremely motivated. He goes, you know what? I'm going to be traveling abroad for 6 months. I want to feel good. I want to know what I can eat while I'm in Europe. And so what can I do, in terms of my diet? So he was extremely compliant, which was great. We added more vegetables into his diet because he had a very low vegetable intake. And he expanded his meal plan. I would say that in less than 6 weeks, he had almost a complete turnaround. It gives me the chills to even think about it because he was not only a delightful young adult male to work with, but he showed such progress in a very short period of time. So I started the protocol with SBI Protect, Meg citrate, because there was constipation dominance, did his labs. We added some electrolytes and some D3, K2, and collagen in there. And he's off and running and doing, really well in his study abroad. This was a fabulous example of using the Fit 176 and the GB. Third one is a fellow that we are still working with. And again, I've been working with him for a little over a year, came in with major GI issues, negative IgE, severe experiences with feeling hungover for days if he had any alcohol. And he wasn't a big drinker, but what he would do is he would sometimes have too many drinks, maybe once or twice out of the month, and then he would feel absolutely awful. And he struggled with a mood disorder as well. He also found that he had this significant bloating that got worse as the day went on, which was kind of a tip off that he probably had some SIBO happening there as well. And he had a hard time maintaining muscle mass. He loved working out. He had been a high school and college athlete. And he said, I am just feeling horrible. What can I do? And so, his Fit and GB showed both gluten, dairy, and gluten. He had a lot of reds, yellows, and oranges, which again, kind of tipped off that there was leaky gut happening here with this poor guy. His genetics also showed that hormones, detox, and I think methylation might have been another one for him, were definitely some of the big areas. So we were combining education around not only the food testing, but then also, again, what were some of the genetic holdups, the things that were making it harder for him to be able to follow through and feel better. So I suggested mostly cooked foods in the beginning, increasing fiber over time. He also had upcoming shoulder surgery. So he was very motivated to want to stay with this plan for more than 3 months. He said, listen, I don't want to break anything because I'm actually feeling better. My brain fog is lifting. He decided to give up alcohol entirely. So for a young adult, that was a major shift, but he found that it made such a difference in his life that he said, you know what, it's not worth it to me to even drink at this point in time. I'll have seltzer. So I gave him my mocktail ideas and he's doing great in that department. But he was super motivated for this upcoming shoulder surgery. So we not only stayed with the green list, because that's what he wanted to do, but we also added some other things like SPM active and some other things to help him prepare for surgery. His next major goal was to wean off of the PPI, the proton pump inhibitor. And I had mentioned that to him very early on when we first met. I said, you're on a PPI because you've got this reflux and some of these other gut symptoms, but that is going to, in the long run, inhibit your body's ability to be able to process proteins, be able to digest properly, and to be able to absorb certain nutrients, even iron and things of that nature. So we are now working on his PPI weaning. He actually has a new primary care physician who is on board, which is great. And so we've started that protocol, and he's actually doing really well. So again, another success story, and just exciting to be working with people that are committed and that, came in, again, we oftentimes get people who, we're the last stop. Been to every physician, I've been to every person. People kind of look at me like the deer in the headlights. how am I going to help you? You're really complicated. And yet there is a way out. And we have to also remember that it's slow. It's a process. It doesn't happen overnight, for sure. So Denise, dive in a little bit about the Practice Better, how we actually use the food lifestyle journals.
Absolutely. I love this tool. It's quite powerful, and it's like one of the greatest things that we have with Practice Better, because it allows our clients to be able to journal their food, mood, and lifestyle. And this is something that we strongly encourage from the get. It's information. And again, with information, we're able to make different decisions about what we're eating and what is actually helping us heal or is a detriment to our health. So Practice Better has a large database of different foods that makes it quite efficient for somebody to start typing in a bread or egg or whatever the meal might be, and quickly they're able to choose that, recreate their meal within the food journal, and right away they're going to start getting a micronutrient breakdown. And with that, we also encourage that they talk about their mood. As we've been talking about some of these cases with clients that come with really huge food allergies or food sensitivities, and there's a lot of symptoms going on. So there's a multitude of GI symptoms, whether it's lethargy or fatigue or bloating. It's important for us to also look at what's going on with the mood. How is what they're eating, their diet, affecting them? And again, going back to that, mindset and insights, and how insights can help to shift mindset. And this is what this information really provides. You wouldn't believe how many clients we have that come to us and they're like, I eat very healthy, so I don't know what's going on. I don't know why I'm feeling this way, or why can't I lose weight? And then when they start journaling, they're like, wow, like they have this moment that they're like, maybe I'm being as, I think I have that immediate feedback that they're able to see this breakdown graphically. But also Julie comes in every single day, looks at the journals, and she provides her expert suggestions.
Thank you. Yes. And there's two ways to actually use the journal. People can do a freestyle entry, which will give me generally an idea of, like, this tells how many, calories, carbs, fats, etc. Sometimes what I will do is I will ask clients to use the database, because the database will then give us the nutrition targets on the right-hand side. And I can be looking at things like calcium, fiber, some of those micronutrients that I might be targeting individually for someone. And so we can toggle back and forth between the two. And I'll just give a very quick story, because I know we're getting close to question time here. Just yesterday, one of our clients who came in with, again, through the immune world, and has had some eczema around her eyes since childhood. And she's actually doing really, really well. But one of the things that we were chatting about yesterday was not only the food, but she said, I was so angry, blah, 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 blah. And we talked a little bit about the way that she handled the situation. And this was a time that she finally owned her anger, settled and calmed her emotions, and then was then able to speak to it. So that's one of her goals over the next few weeks. But she also noticed that her eczema was worse. And so this is another beautiful example of, it's not only the food, it's also the mood. And so we have to really be aware of looking at our clients and our patients as a whole person. So I think that's a really, really important one. So with meal planning, as I mentioned, we have this wonderful meal planning tool that we can also use through our health portal, which is wonderful. Everything integrates together. And I can take the information from the 176 report find out what else they don't like or they're not eating. If I need to create their macros so that we're balancing their proteins, carbs, and fats a little bit better, plug that in there, and then come up with either a 5 or 7 day meal plan, a month meal plan, whatever it might be. And it will also provide a grocery list. Now, also, clients can increase or decrease the number of servings. I generally am making these meal plans for 2 servings if it's for an individual client. And I use the 2-day food rule, which is you can eat it today, finish off leftovers tomorrow. Otherwise, they go in the freezer. And the reason for that is so that we're not growing those little bad bugs, the aspergillus or the food molds, that while they're not going to kill us, they can, they can start to break down those gut barrier junctions. So that's another important one that we talk about with people. And this is just an example of a recipe. So for some people, again, that have no clue what it's supposed to look like on the plate, you can actually see a beautiful visual as well as a simple recipe. You can also filter by few ingredients. So if a client says, you know what, I'm not going to spend more than 30 minutes in the kitchen, I don't want any more than 7 ingredients in my thing, I can filter recipes according to what they want. So it's very, very robust and very helpful with, again, taking the data and putting it into practical reality. So Denise, talk just a little bit about the healing process and our wheel of life, and then we'd love to get to questions and answers.
Absolutely. So I love this part. Recently, in listening to a talk from Dr. Bruce Lipton, who's the father of epigenetics, I was reminded of how powerful is the work that we do and why we believe so strongly in the blend of the science and the sacred. Yes, I coach clients on lifestyle changes, but I also support our clients in getting to the deeper questions of life, the perennial questions. Why are we here? And how do we make the best of the time that we're here? Honoring self-care is a complete paradigm shift for many that have been indoctrinated in thinking that self-care is selfish, especially for women. So exploring all the dimensions of our humanity with our clients really helps them to be deeply seen and heard, probably for the first time. I spoke earlier about a lot of the assessments that we use and the different tools to guide some of these deeper questions. So the Wheel of Life is one of those tools that helps the client and us to really see where there are gaps in a patient's, or in a client's perceived reality versus their desired reality. Interestingly enough, Julie and I have been able to use this information from these assessments and connect them to significant events and health status changes in our client's timeline. So supporting clients to incorporate life goals with health goals, we find is really increasing the mental and emotional as well as the physical health outcomes in our clients, which is tremendously important to us.
Yes, thank you, Denise. All right, so we are here for any questions that might have come in, James, and this has been absolutely delightful.
Well, no, I've got a few that I'm going to throw out to you. One of them I'm intrigued if we can put in the thing is that list of brands you mentioned. That would be great. And then one of the questions I'm going to ask both of you is, I've written down a long list of kind of what I would describe as clinical gems as well. So think about some of the things there. I'm going to start with one of them is the 3 to 8 grams of fiber. I think not many people realize the kind of significance of that. I'd love if you could give them a little bit more information how they get hold of that practice better, because I think the whole, food, mood, lifestyle is fantastic. So again, something like that would be interesting. So I apologize, I kind of regurgitated 3 questions all at once, but have a go at those 3, and then I've got a few more coming in as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I have hand-curated lists. I'll be happy to email some of them over to you for people that would like. People can also reach out to us at our emails, and we're happy to, to send that information to you as well. Practice Better it's a healthcare portal, so it's a very robust healthcare portal for practitioners that are using lifestyle, functional medicine, integrative medicine. So It's been a wonderful product for us to use. They are also very open to suggestions. Like, you know, as they're adding more integrations on, one of the things that I mentioned to them was we're starting to use continuous glucose monitoring in our practice. We think this is an important, you know, methodology. Could you put that on your list with the development team? Absolutely. So again, they're very open to how can we create the most comprehensive, robust portal for clients and for practitioners. So that's what Practice Better is all about. Yeah.
Because one of the other things that kind of came up as well was how often do you check in? And again, this seems like a great tool to be able to aid that kind of check-in process as well.
Yes, yes. So the portal is, it has the availability for clients to use messaging, which would just be like an instant message. Wow. The thing is, they have to have it turned on so that there can be back and forth communication. So every morning, the very first thing I do is I pop on the coffee. I love my coffee. And I sit down and I open up my Practice Better portal and I look at everybody's messages. I also then review all of their food records, their lifestyle records, their journals and things of that nature. Denise and I are constantly back and forth. In fact, one of the other things that's been really beneficial is that some products are being highlighted right now, and so they're out of stock. And so Denise just said to me today, hey, Julie, what's going to be the alternative for this particular product since that one's out of stock? Because again, we want to be able to keep the clients engaged and being able to follow through with their protocols. So we use it every day. So for people who do log on, we're there. Yep. That's
great. And then one of the other questions, do you guys, when you deal with clients, do you both kind of have an interaction with them, or do you kind of split it out so you have your own? Because it feels like the combination of you together in tandem is amazing. So is that something that you always do, or is it kind of like, you know, on a case-by-case basis?
So the way
actually,
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, our programs are built to do both. So our introduction to the client and really reviewing all their assessments and all their forms is done in a team format. Julie and I are both with them together, where we begin to have that sort of initial working plan and start co-creating some goals. And the next touch point where we're together as a team again is when we review their genetics tests. So when we get those results, we come together again because both of us are working, you know, the client and Julie and I will be working on co-creating those goals with the client. And then they have breakout sessions or individual sessions with Julie, and they'll have individual sessions with me as well.
That's great. Because again, it seems like that the power of that, the data, and then actually, as you say, looking at through, you know, as you mentioned the kind of deprivation, you know, the discouragement bit, feeling overwhelmed. The fact that you're dealing with both of those elements is really well. I think it's practical because again, it's the reality, and it is great that you've kind of identified that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. You touched on the reintroduction, was like we're just going through those kind of clinical gems there as well. Again, I love the fact that you're using that life goals as well, that wheel of life, because that seems, you know, that combination of life and health goals is so critical, isn't it? Because you say it's almost impossible to differentiate the two. So it's great that you, and do you use that with every client, or is it how does that come about?
Yes.
We do. We use it with every client. And while I think initially we were thinking of, you know, this is extra information we're using. This is another piece of data that we bring together. So literally, as we continue to see clients, we've actually been connecting these different data points and seeing where there are large gaps in a particular area of a person's life is directly correlated to health incidents that are happening with patients. So again, that reinforcement that it's not just about food, it's not just about the body, but that also the mind, the emotions, all of this is connected into what the person's experience is like.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, it's so funny. Like, you know, we look at what we're doing in terms of making sure we linked the food inflammation test with the, you know, with the gut health, and now, as we were talking about a little bit before, the kind of the CIT test, and it's the same here. I mean, you're sharp at 9 because you've got to come up with the kind of food, mood, lifestyle. And that's fantastic. But yeah, that's, I think, the whole thing. It's that interaction between all of them, and I think that's the very great thing that you guys are doing, is you're bringing all those things to do versus looking at things in isolation.
Yes,
Yes.
yes, thank you. And you know, it also brings up that coaching. So coaching has almost kind of like that split. The same thing as I say with the dietitians. We have, you know, we have the functional and integrative dietitians, and we have the Kraft macaroni and cheese dietitians. And I don't happen to be part of the Kraft macaroni and cheese group, but in coaching, you know, a lot of the lifestyle coaching has been really on not connecting that sole purpose. And the coaching that we're really bringing in is, yeah, some of that. It's like, let's keep on the plan, let's keep doing it. But it's really, well, why do I want to do that? What's my personal why? What are my unique gifts? What is it that I'm meant to be actually bringing forth in this life? What's my purpose? And how do I redefine that and define that over times in life? So.
Yeah, that's great. Well,
yeah.
I think that's all the questions we've had. So thank you very much indeed. That's the hour up. Oh my God, it's flown by. So that,
oh my God,
that's always a good indicator for me how great a talk is. It's like, oh my gosh, how do we go through that hour so fast? So thank you both so much for your insights. It's been wonderful to listen to it. And again, we'll make sure for everyone, we'll share the slides as well as the talk in terms of this recording. And again, thank you both so much for such a wonderful talk, and all those wonderful kind of clinical gems all the way through it as well. So thank you both very much indeed.
You're so welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Right, thank you.